Okay, so you know that conversation between Lisa and John you sent over? The one where they were talking about learning to think in English?
Yeah, yeah,
I thought it was so interesting and something that like so many people struggle with,
yeah.
you know? It's like, how do you actually get to the point where you're not constantly translating in your head, but actually thinking in English?
Right, exactly. And you know what? That's exactly what we're going to kind of unpack in this deep dive today. It's like taking all of that advice that Lisa was giving to John and figuring out, like, what are those specific things that people can do to kind of make that shift from
Right.
constantly translating to actually thinking in English.
Right, because I feel like that's such a game changer. You know, when you finally realize like, oh my gosh, I'm not having to like go back and forth between languages in my head. I'm actually just thinking in English.
Yeah.
So Lisa's first suggestion was something that seems so simple. And I actually think we've talked about this before. She said, when you're alone, just like describe what you're doing in English
Uh-huh.
out loud or even just in your head.
Yeah. And it is simple, but you know what? It's like so foundational because if you think about it, like I'm making coffee, I'm going for a walk. These are things that like your brain is already doing. You know,
Yeah.
it's already processing those actions without you needing to like think in your native language. So it's like taking those things that are already so automatic and just verbalizing them in English,
Yeah.
even if it's just to yourself in your head, you're kind of building that like internal monologue in English.
Right. And I think it's about like connecting the action with the English word right. Like not even going through the step of translating it in your head. It's like literally I'm opening the door.
Yes, exactly.
And that's something you can do like anywhere.
Right. Anywhere, anytime.
You don't need any tools. You don't need anything. It's just you and your thoughts.
Exactly. And it's like a muscle,
Right.
right? The more you do it, the stronger it gets.
Crazy.
And then she built on that with something that was also very practical and it was very visual. And she said, use sticky notes to label things in your house.
Yeah. And I love that, especially if someone's feeling a little overwhelmed.
Yeah.
Like, how do I even begin to think in English? It's like, okay, well, just start with the things around you.
Hmm.
You know, you see a table, it says table. You see a window, it says window. What do you think are some of the most common things that people should start with?
Oh, gosh. I would say like high frequency nouns, right? Like things that you interact with every single day. Door, window, computer,
Yeah.
phone, like just the things that you use all the time. Cup.
Yeah.
I think that would be really, really helpful.
And it's like building that association, right? It's not even like, oh, I'm just trying to memorize these words. It's like, no, I am connecting this object with this English word every time I see it. So
Exactly.
it becomes much more automatic.
Exactly.
Okay, so what happens when you come across a word that you don't know? Because I feel like that can be a roadblock for people. Because then they're like, oh, well, now I have to switch back to my native language to think about how to say that.
Hmm.
Lisa had a really good strategy for this.
Hmm. And you know what? This is something that comes up all the time, and it's a really, really good point.
Right.
So her advice was circumlocution, which is a fancy word for saying describe it.
Yes.
So instead of getting stuck on that word that you don't know and then like having your brain go back to your native language because it's getting frustrated,
Right.
you just describe it using the English words that you do know.
Right. So like if you don't know the word colander, you say, the thing that I use to drain the water from my pasta.
Yeah.
There has all the little holes.
And it's so interesting because even native English speakers do that all the time. Like, we don't always have the perfect word.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So we have to describe things. And I think that that's actually like a really good skill for English learners to develop because it helps them to just keep thinking in English.
And it also points out those gaps in your vocabulary, right? Like, oh, I don't know the word for this, so I need to go look that up.
Right, exactly.
Okay, so we've talked about describing things, we've talked about labeling things, and then Lisa talks about something that I think a lot of learners already do, which is like immersion. So you're watching movies, you're listening to podcasts, you're reading books in English. But she pointed out that even while you're doing that, you still might be translating in your head.
Yeah.
You're being exposed to it, but you're not necessarily like fully in it.
Right. And your brain is almost acting like a translator in the background.
Yeah.
And so you're not really fully engaging with the language. You're just kind of like translating it in your head.
Right. So it's like passive versus active.
Yeah, exactly.
And then her next suggestion was this idea of like active listening and repetition. She called it shadowing. Can you explain what that is?
Yeah. So shadowing is basically you listen to something in English and you repeat it almost at the same time. So you're like a shadow. You're following the speaker. And what's really cool about that is that it's not just about understanding the words. It's about like internalizing the rhythm and the intonation and the like music of the language.
Yeah.
And you know how native speakers actually put sentences together?
Yeah.
Because a lot of times it goes beyond just the dictionary definition of the word.
Right. So you're actually like training your mouth muscles to work in that way.
Yeah.
And to make those sounds.
Yeah, and your brain.
Yeah.
It's like working together. And you're getting a feel for like the melody of the language.
Well, because we don't just speak in like monotone.
Yeah.
There's ups and downs and like the flow and all of that.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Okay, and then Lisa had a tip that I found very intriguing. She said, try thinking in English before you go to sleep. What's the point of that?
Well, I think that that's like really tapping into the power of your subconscious.
Right.
Because if you're thinking about like the events of your day or you're planning what you need to do tomorrow and you're doing that in English, you're basically making English the default language of your thoughts.
Right.
And John had a really good example of that. He was like, tomorrow I will go to the gym and then I will meet my friend for coffee. So it can be as simple as that.
Yeah.
Just thinking about your day in English.
Right. And it's like those little moments, right? Because before you go to sleep, your mind is kind of like wandering anyway. So why not wander in English?
Exactly.
And it just makes it more of a habit. Now, one thing that I noticed throughout all of Lisa's advice was this idea of not being afraid to make mistakes and not worrying about being perfect. Why do you think that that's such a huge hurdle for English language learners?
I think because a lot of learners get so caught up in like trying to have perfect grammar
Yeah.
that they're afraid to actually speak and they're afraid to actually think in English.
Right. It's almost carolizing.
Right. They're so afraid of saying something wrong. And you know what? Native English speakers make mistakes all the time.
Oh, yeah, all the time.
We pause, we correct ourselves, we rephrase things. It's just a natural part of communication.
Right. You would sound so strange if you were like talking like a robot and like every sentence was perfectly grammatically correct.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I think, for anyone listening, it's just like give yourself permission to make mistakes.
Yeah.
Because that's actually how you're going to learn and improve.
Exactly.
And it's how you get more comfortable.
Exactly.
Okay. So finally, Lisa emphasizes the importance of actually speaking with other people, like finding a language exchange partner or joining an English conversation group. Why is that so important for thinking in English?
Because that's when you have to think on your feet.
Yeah.
You know you don't have time to translate in your head.
Yeah.
You have to be able to access your vocabulary and your sentence structures and all of that stuff like in real time.
Right.
And I think that that's really the best way to make it automatic.
It's like the real world test. Right?
Yeah.
It's like, okay, I can think in English in my head, but can I do it when I'm having a conversation? Yeah. And John mentioned that he was going to look for some online groups.
Yeah.
Which I think is so great because it's so accessible now. So to everyone listening, we've covered a lot of ground here.
Yeah, we have.
We've talked about everything from describing your morning routine to mentally planning out your day in English before you go to sleep.
And labeling things and shadowing.
Yes.
Lots of techniques.
So many good strategies. And like Lisa emphasized, consistent practice is key. You don't have to do everything at once.
Right.
Just start incorporating one or two of these things into your daily routine. And I think that's such a great point to end on. Just imagine how even those small, consistent efforts could really transform your relationship with the language.
Yeah. I mean, think about it. If you just start making a little bit of effort every day to think in English, even if it's just for 5 minutes, you would be amazed at how much progress you could make.
And you know what?
Yeah.
You might actually find yourself enjoying the process.
Exactly. And it's fun.
Yeah.
It's a challenge, but it's fun. So yeah, give it a try and see what happens.
Yeah, see what happens.
I think you'll be really surprised.
Great. Well, thanks for breaking all of that down. I think that was so helpful. And I hope that everyone listening feels inspired to start thinking in English more and more.
Yes, me too.
Awesome.